People said no maid ever lasted more than a week in Edward Ashford's mansion. Some ran away crying. Others shouted and slammed doors. One even ran out barefoot into the rain, holding her shoes in her hands. Everyone said the same thing: the house wasn't the problem. It was Charlotte Whitmore. To London's high society, Charlotte was perfect, tall, beautiful, and engaged to one of the city's richest men. But inside the mansion on Kensington Lane, she was different. Her voice was sharp, her rules changed every day, and her anger came without warning. 9 maids had come and gone in just 6 months. None stayed past day 7. Then came Emma Collins. She didn't have fancy clothes or a big suitcase, just one small bag, a worn-out coat, and a scarf tied neatly around her head. But inside her eyes was something strong, a mother's courage. Her little girl, Lily, was 9 years old and very sick, waiting for a heart operation Emma couldn't afford. When the agency warned her about the mansion, Emma only said, "I'll stay as long as I can." Her first morning felt like walking into a dream. The floors shone like glass, the chandeliers sparkled, and the silver railings looked too clean to touch. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Allen, gave Emma a mop and a short instruction. "Start with the marble hallway," she said quickly. "Madam doesn't like to see footprints." Emma nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She started cleaning quietly, her movements careful. She needed this job more than anything. Every minute here meant hope for Lily. At 7 o'clock, Charlotte appeared, silk robe, diamond ring, phone in hand. She stopped when she saw Emma. "You're new?" she said coldly. "Yes, ma'am," Emma answered softly. Charlotte didn't reply. She pushed the mop bucket slightly with her heel. Water spilled across the floor Emma had just cleaned. "Do it again," she said with a smile that wasn't kind. "And next time, try not to look so lost." Emma knelt down and began cleaning again without a word. Her heart hurt, but she stayed calm. For Lily, she thought. For her, I can handle anything. From the corner, another maid whispered, "She won't last till Friday." But Emma had lived through nights without food, days filled with hospital bills, and months of fear. A cruel woman couldn't break her. That night, the front door opened. Edward Ashford walked in, tall, serious, dressed in an expensive black suit. He didn't look at the staff. He never did. To him, the mansion was just another business, quiet, organized, and perfect. He passed Emma without noticing her. Edward Ashford didn't believe in feelings. He believed in numbers, meetings, and control. People called him the man with the frozen heart. Maybe they were right, but everything began to change one quiet evening. Edward came home early one night. He wanted peace after a long day at work, but as he stepped inside, he heard voices coming from the kitchen. Charlotte's voice, loud and angry. "Do you know how much that costs? You're so careless." Then came the sound of something breaking a teacup smashing on the floor. He stopped. Normally, he avoided drama. But something about the fear in the other voice made him listen. "I'm sorry, ma'am," came Emma's soft reply. "It was an accident." Her tone was gentle, not rude, not defensive, just honest. Edward took a few quiet steps and looked through the reflection on the kitchen cabinet. Charlotte stood tall and angry, while Emma knelt on the floor, picking up the broken pieces with her bare hands. Charlotte's heels clicked against the tiles. "Learn your place," she said coldly. "I don't pay you to make mistakes." Edward felt something stir inside him, anger, or maybe shame. He had seen Charlotte act cruel before, but he always told himself she was just strict. That's how people like them stayed in control. But now, watching this woman humble, shaking, yet calm, he saw something else. "Enough," Edward said suddenly. Charlotte turned in surprise. "Edward, you're home early." "Clearly," he replied. "She broke my antique cup. I was just teaching." "Accidents happen," he interrupted. "You don't need to make a scene." The kitchen went silent. Emma froze where she was, still holding a broken piece in her hand. Charlotte forced a smile. "Of course, darling. I was just correcting her." Edward looked at Emma again, really looked at her this time. She kept her head down, but there was quiet strength in the way she moved. "Clean it up, then rest for the night," he said softly. "Yes, sir." she murmured. That night, at dinner, Charlotte spoke about her upcoming charity gala and her new dress fitting. Edward listened halfway. His mind kept returning to the kitchen, to the sight of a maid kneeling with patience, not fear. For the first time in years, Edward Ashford felt something he had forgotten existed: guilt. From that night on, he began to notice things. The silence in his house didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt heavy, like the quiet before a storm. He noticed how the other maids stiffened when Charlotte entered a room. He noticed how their laughter stopped. And he noticed Emma. Every morning, before sunrise, she was already working, cleaning windows, polishing the floors, arranging flowers. She never complained, she never rushed, and she always greeted others with a calm, "Good morning." One day, as Edward walked past the pantry, he heard her whispering on the phone. "Yes, doctor. Please don't stop her treatment. I'll find a way. I'll send something soon." Her voice shook slightly, but she didn't cry. She hung up, took a deep breath, and went back to dusting the shelves like nothing happened. Edward stood there, frozen. He didn't mean to listen, but he couldn't move. That day at work, he couldn't focus. The sound of her voice stayed with him all day. That evening, he called his assistant. "Raise the domestic staff salaries by 10%, he said. "Any reason, sir?" "No reason," he replied quietly. The next morning, the staff gathered to sign the new pay slips. Emma smiled softly, her eyes bright with surprise. She thanked the housekeeper, but never knew it was Edward's doing. From upstairs, he watched her smile. It was small, but it made him feel something strange, something warm. A few days later, he noticed her shoes. They were worn out and cracked at the sides. He ordered a new pair and had them sent in a plain box, with no note. When she opened it, Emma looked surprised. "Who sent this?" she asked. Nobody knew, but Edward saw her from the upstairs window as she tried them on and smiled. For the first time in years, that simple smile made him feel alive. Charlotte began to notice the changes, too. Edward spoke less to her. He seemed distant, thoughtful. He didn't praise her anymore when she complained about the staff. When she said a maid was careless, he asked for proof. When she rolled her eyes, he looked disappointed. At dinner one evening, she said sharply, "That maid, the quiet one, she stares too much. I don't trust her." Edward looked up. "You don't trust anyone who isn't afraid of you." Charlotte froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Excuse me?" "Forget it," he said, returning to his food. But she didn't forget. The next morning, she stopped Emma on the stairs. "Don't think I don't see what you're doing," she whispered angrily. "You're not special. Do your job and stay quiet." "Yes, ma'am," Emma said calmly, walking away without fear. And that's when Charlotte knew her anger no longer worked. That evening, Edward found Emma in the garden trimming roses. "You're still working?" he asked softly. She turned, startled. "Oh, Mr. Ashford, I just like to finish what I start." He smiled faintly. "You remind me of someone." "Who?" "My mother," he said quietly. "She used to work too hard. Never complained either." Emma smiled back. "Maybe some of us don't know how to stop." He didn't reply, but his eyes softened. As he walked back inside, he glanced at her again. For years, he believed power came from control. But now, he was learning something new. Sometimes, strength comes from calmness, and sometimes, love begins in silence. By the second week, something had changed inside Edward Ashford's mansion. The air that once felt heavy now seemed softer. The staff smiled more. Laughter returned to the halls, quiet but real. Even Mrs. Allen, who never joked, began humming while folding towels. Everyone felt it, except Charlotte Whitmore. To her, the change was an insult. For years, she had ruled that mansion like a queen. Her words were law, her anger a warning. But now, people didn't flinch when she entered. The house no longer obeyed her moods. Even the walls felt different, calmer, warmer, and she knew exactly who to blame. Emma Collins. In Charlotte's eyes, Emma wasn't just another maid anymore. She was a threat. Not because of her beauty or her voice, but because she carried peace. And peace is something angry people can't stand. One evening, Charlotte walked into Edward's study. The clock ticked softly, and the firelight touched the edges of his face as he read a file. He didn't look up. "You've changed," she said coldly. Edward turned a page. I've been busy. No, she said, stepping closer. You've been watching. He paused. Watching what? Charlotte folded her arms. Her. That maid, Emma. He looked up slowly, meeting her eyes. Don't start this again. Don't lie to me, she said sharply. You've been defending her. You've been distant. You barely look at me anymore. Edward sighed, tired. Charlotte, stop. You're imagining things. Am I? She said with a bitter laugh. You think I don't see how you look at her? Like she's special. He put the file down, his voice calm but cold. I look at her because she reminds me that kindness still exists, something I've forgotten how to feel in this house. Charlotte froze. What's that supposed to mean? He looked her straight in the eye. It means I finally see how you treat people. The maids, the drivers, the staff, everyone who leaves crying. For years, I believed you when you said they were lazy. I believed you when you said they disrespected you. But now I know why they left. Her face went pale. Edward, he stood slowly. I saw you pour that water on her floor. I saw you break your own cup just to humiliate her. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. He shook his head. You've become someone I don't recognize. Her voice broke into a whisper. You're falling for her. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was already there between them, silent but heavy. Charlotte's eyes filled with angry tears. If you walk away from me, Edward, I'll make you regret it. He looked at her with calm sadness. Do what you must, Charlotte, but I won't live my life in fear. He left the room, his footsteps steady, his heart strangely lighter. That night, Edward couldn't sleep. He walked through the quiet halls, passing rooms that now felt unfamiliar. When he reached the laundry room, he stopped. Emma was there folding linens neatly under the dim light, her scarf a soft shadow around her face. She looked up in surprise. Mr. Ashford, she said softly, is something wrong? He shook his head. No, nothing's wrong. I just wanted to see if you're comfortable here. She smiled a little. Yes, sir, I'm fine. This job means everything to me. Her voice was calm, but her eyes told a deeper story, one of sleepless nights, unpaid bills, and silent prayers. He hesitated before asking, Do you have any family nearby? She nodded slowly. Just my daughter. She's at St. George's Hospital. She's been there for months. He frowned gently. Is she unwell? Emma swallowed hard. She has a heart condition. The doctors say she needs surgery soon, but it's expensive. I'm saving every penny I can. For a long time, Edward said nothing. He just looked at her, realizing how much strength it took for this small, gentle woman to carry so much. You won't lose this job, he said quietly. I promise you that. Her eyes widened slightly. Thank you, sir. He gave a small nod. Good night, Emma. Good night, Mr. Ashford. As she left, Edward felt something inside him shift, something he hadn't felt in years. Compassion. The next morning, Charlotte watched him from the top of the stairs as he walked past without greeting her. His eyes were distant, his thoughts far away, and every time they drifted, she knew exactly where they went to that maid. By lunchtime, Charlotte's jealousy was boiling. She found Emma polishing the silverware in the dining room and walked up behind her. I see what you're doing, Charlotte said quietly. Emma turned, confused. Ma'am? Charlotte leaned closer, her voice sharp like glass. Don't think you can fool me. You're trying to make him notice you. Emma's brows furrowed. No, ma'am, I'm just doing my job. Charlotte smiled tightly. Do it quietly. I don't want to see you in his sight again. Emma nodded politely, but as she turned away, her heart raced. Not out of fear, but realization. Her calmness, her kindness, was breaking Charlotte's power. That evening, Edward returned home early from work. The sky outside was turning gold, and the house was quiet. Through the window, he saw Emma in the garden, trimming roses. He stepped outside, his shoes crunching lightly on the gravel. You're still working? He asked. She turned, surprised. Oh, Mr. Ashford, I just wanted to finish these before sunset. A light breeze moved between them, carrying the faint scent of roses. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was something peaceful about the silence, something that didn't need words. Do you ever get tired, Emma? he asked finally. She smiled faintly. All the time, but I don't let it stop me. You can't, when someone you love is depending on you. Edward's heart ached at her honesty. You're a strong woman, she laughed gently. Strong or just stubborn, I'm not sure which. He smiled for the first time in days. Maybe both. From that evening onward, Edward began to see Emma differently, not as staff, not as someone beneath him, but as a person with courage, patience, and quiet dignity. Every small thing she did, the way she spoke, the way she smiled when she thought no one saw, touched him in ways he didn't understand. And slowly, without meaning to, he started looking forward to seeing her each day. He noticed how she made tea careful, steady hands, never spilling a drop. He noticed how she hummed while she worked, and how even the birds outside seemed to listen. Her presence made the mansion feel alive again, not grand, not cold, just human. But peace never lasts where jealousy lives. Charlotte watched every look, every glance, every quiet smile that passed between them. Her anger grew like a storm cloud, and one afternoon, she decided she'd had enough. Edward was in his office when Charlotte burst in, slamming the door behind her. Her eyes were full of rage. "Are you in love with that maid?" she shouted. Edward looked up slowly, calm as ever. "Charlotte, not this again. Don't lie to me," she cried. "You defend her. You protect her. You look at her like she matters." He set down his pen, his voice low and steady. "She does matter, Charlotte, because she's kind, because she treats people with respect, because she's everything you stopped being." Charlotte's breath caught. "So that's it? You're ending us over some housemaid?" He sighed. "I'm ending this because I finally see who you are." Her eyes filled with tears. "If you walk away, I'll ruin you. I'll tell the press you're having an affair. I'll destroy your name." Edward stood up, his voice quiet but firm. "Then do it. I'd rather live with truth than with fear." For the first time, Charlotte realized she had lost control, and for the first time, Edward realized he had found peace. That night, the mansion was silent again, but not the same silence as before. It was softer, lighter. The man who had once been called the man with the frozen heart finally felt warmth returning, and it all began with one maid and her quiet kind of strength. The mansion on Kensington Lane had never felt so quiet. Charlotte was gone now, her clothes, her perfumes, her sharp words, all of it. Her things had been collected that morning, and the house finally breathed again. The staff worked lighter, their laughter returning like birds after a storm. But for Edward Ashford, the silence inside him was still new. He thought of Emma Collins, the way she smiled when no one watched, the way her voice turned gentle when she spoke of her daughter, the quiet strength she carried, not loud, not proud, just steady, like the ticking of a clock that never broke. For weeks, he'd been watching her live her life with quiet courage, and now that Charlotte was gone, he noticed her even more, not as staff, but as someone who had brought warmth back into his world. The next morning, Edward came downstairs early. Emma was already in the kitchen, tying her scarf as sunlight touched the windows. "Good morning, Mr. Ashford," she said, surprised to see him. "Good morning," he replied softly. "You're up early. I like to start before the others," she said, smiling a little. "It keeps me calm." He nodded, then hesitated. "How's Lily doing?" Emma's eyes softened, though there was worry behind her smile. "She's stable, thank God. But the doctor said the surgery can't wait much longer. I'm trying to save as much as I can." Edward wanted to tell her not to worry. He wanted to say he could fix everything. But he knew her pride, gentle, quiet, but strong wouldn't let her accept charity easily. So, instead, he said, "You're doing well. You should be proud." She nodded politely. "Thank you, sir." And when he walked away, her words followed him like a whisper he couldn't shake. "I'm trying to save." That night, Edward sat at his desk long after everyone had gone to bed. He opened his laptop and began searching hospitals, charities, foundations. Then he picked up the phone. "This is Edward Ashford," he said. "I'd like to speak to the head of billing at St. George's Hospital." There was a pause. "Yes, Mr. Ashford. One moment." A few transfers later, he spoke quietly but firmly. There's a little girl named Lily Collins. She's waiting for heart surgery. I want to pay for it completely, anonymously." The woman on the phone hesitated. "That's very generous, sir, but we'll need permission from the family." "Tell her it's a charity sponsor," Edward said. "She doesn't need to know who." By the end of the call, the arrangements were made. The payment was sent, the surgery scheduled. He leaned back in his chair, exhausted but peaceful for the first time in years. His money had built companies, bought cars, opened doors, but tonight it was saving a child's life. And that, he thought, was the best deal he'd ever made. 3 weeks later, Emma's phone rang while she was polishing silver in the dining room. "Hello? Good morning, Miss Collins," said a cheerful voice. "This is St. George's Hospital. We have wonderful news. A charity sponsor has stepped in to pay for your daughter's surgery. Everything is covered. The procedure is booked for Monday morning." Emma froze, the cloth falling from her hand. "A charity? Are you sure?" "Yes, ma'am. Everything has been paid in full. You can focus on being with your daughter." Tears filled her eyes. Her knees gave way, and she sank to the floor. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you so much." When she hung up, she pressed her hands together, crying softly in relief. For months, she had carried that burden alone, and now, suddenly, it was gone. She didn't know who had helped her, but she thanked God all the same. That evening, when Edward returned home, she was waiting by the staircase, her face glowing with joy. "Mr. Ashford," she said breathlessly, "I have good news. The hospital called a charity is paying for Lily's surgery. Everything is covered." Edward's eyes softened. "That's wonderful news. I don't know who they are," she said, smiling through tears, "but I wish I could thank them." He smiled faintly. "Maybe you already have." She frowned in confusion. "What do you mean?" He met her gaze, his voice quiet. "Sometimes kindness doesn't need to be repaid. Sometimes it's just meant to remind us we're not alone." Emma's eyes filled again. "Oh, that's beautiful, sir." He nodded gently. "So is your courage." For a moment, they stood there, the air between them warm and still. The world outside continued: cars, rain, city sounds, but inside that mansion, something else was growing. Something soft and fragile and real. The next few days passed in a blur of hospital visits. Emma took time off to be with Lily, and the other maids missed her calming presence. Even Mrs. Allen said, "It feels quieter without her." Edward pretended to stay busy with meetings, but he found himself thinking about them, about Lily's brave little heart, and about Emma's smile that day in the hall. He checked with the hospital in secret, making sure the surgery went smoothly. When he got the final call, the operation was successful. The child is recovering well. He exhaled deeply, closing his eyes with quiet relief. He didn't tell anyone what he had done. He didn't want praise. He just wanted her daughter to live. 2 weeks later, Emma returned to work. Her face looked lighter, her steps softer. She carried the kind of joy that made the air itself brighter. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her smile wide. Mrs. Allen hugged her. "How's your girl?" "She's strong," Emma said proudly. "The doctor said she'll be able to go back to school soon." The whole staff cheered softly, happy for her. Even Edward, standing in the doorway unnoticed, smiled. That evening, he found her in the garden again, watering the roses. "How's Lily?" he asked. Emma turned, her eyes shining. "She's doing so well, sir." "She's laughing again, eating well, drawing pictures every day. I can't thank that charity enough." He nodded slowly. "Maybe some kindness is not meant to be repaid, Emma. Maybe it's meant to be shared." She smiled softly. "You always say things that make me think," he chuckled. "That's a rare compliment for me." For a while, they stood in silence, the golden light of sunset touching the garden. Then she spoke quietly. "It feels strange, sir." "What does?" "For years I've prayed for help, and when it came, I didn't even know who sent it. But I feel like maybe it was someone who understood what kindness means." Edward looked at her, his heart full. "Maybe it was someone who saw your strength and wanted to honor it." She smiled again, eyes wet with emotion. "Thank you for saying that." He nodded. "You're stronger than you think, Emma. She lowered her gaze. I had to be. When you're a mother, love makes you brave. Edward's voice softened. And when you're lucky, love teaches you how to live again. She looked up, meeting his eyes, and for a brief moment, the world stopped. No walls, no titles, no lines between them, just two hearts that had found something they didn't expect to find again. Peace. That night, as Edward sat alone in his study, he thought about all the ways life could surprise a man who thought he had seen it all. He had lost one kind of love, cold and shallow, only to find another kind growing quietly in the corner of his own home. Maybe love doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it walks in softly, carrying a mop and a smile. He smiled faintly, closing his eyes. And somewhere across town, a little girl named Lily slept peacefully, her heart stronger, her future bright, because one man had finally remembered how to care. That evening, he found Emma arranging flowers in the dining room. How's Lily? He asked, his voice low but warm. Emma turned, her smile soft. She's doing wonderfully, sir. The doctor said her heart is strong. They think she'll be able to go back to school soon. That's good news, Edward said, the corners of his mouth lifting. It's more than good, Emma whispered. It's a miracle. He didn't see her as the maid who worked in his house. He saw her as a woman who had faced life's storms with courage and still managed to stay kind. The city lights flickered like stars, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He thought about Charlotte, her lies, her threats, her need for power. She had filled his world with noise. But Emma had filled it with quiet meaning. The difference was everything. His phone buzzed suddenly. A news alert flashed across the screen. Charlotte Whitmore faces backlash for false claims against billionaire Edward Ashford. He read it once, sighed, and set the phone aside. When Emma knocked gently at the open door, he looked up. Sorry to disturb you, she said, stepping inside. I saw the news. Are you all right? He nodded slowly. I'm fine. She made her choices. The truth caught up with her. Emma frowned. Still, I'm sorry. Because of me, your name, because of her, he interrupted softly. Don't ever blame yourself for someone else's cruelty. Her eyes glistened. I just don't like seeing anyone hurt because of me. He smiled faintly. Then we're more alike than I thought. She blinked, surprised. Alike? He nodded. You carry everyone's pain, Emma quietly, like it's your duty. But you forget that you deserve care, too. Her lips parted slightly. And who's going to care for me, sir? His gaze softened. Someone who finally understands what your strength means. The air between them changed slower, heavier, filled with something that made her heartbeat quicken. Thank you, she whispered, her voice trembling, for always being kind to me. Edward took a slow step closer. No, he said gently. You taught me kindness. I just learned how to give it back. The next morning, Emma received a package from the hospital. Inside was a small card hand-drawn in bright colors and glitter. It read, Thank you for saving me. Love, Lily. Tears filled her eyes instantly. She pressed the card to her heart. That evening, Edward came home early. He found her sitting in the living room, holding the little card, tears glistening on her cheeks. He walked closer. That's from Lily? She nodded, smiling through her tears. She wanted to thank the people who helped her. She doesn't even know who they are. He smiled faintly. Maybe she doesn't need to. Maybe love has already found its way to her heart. Emma looked up, really seeing him then the man behind the title, behind the wealth. For the first time, she saw warmth in his eyes that words couldn't hide. Sometimes, she said softly, I feel like you understand things no one else does. He chuckled quietly. Maybe I've just been listening better lately. They both laughed, gently. And in that laughter, something beautiful bloomed quiet and certain. A week later, Edward visited Lily for the first time. She was sitting on the couch, drawing hearts with crayons when she saw him. Mommy's boss, she said cheerfully, waving. Look, I made another card. Edward crouched beside her. It's beautiful, Lily, she giggled. Mommy smiles more now. Did you do that? He looked at Emma, who stood behind her daughter, smiling softly. Maybe we helped each other, he said. Emma's voice was tender. Maybe you did more than you'll ever know. Lily looked between them curiously. Are you friends now? Edward smiled. Yes, Lily. I think we are. The little girl nodded proudly, satisfied, then went back to coloring. And as Emma and Edward's eyes met, something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, admiration, and the gentle spark of love. Moral of the story: true kindness never goes unnoticed. Sometimes the quietest love becomes the loudest miracle. The end. Did you enjoy this story? Kindly tell us where you are watching from in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories like this. Thank you so much for watching.